Good afternoon all. Welcome to Disqualified Dads. First and foremost, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. If you want to sponsor and donate, we have a PayPal link in the description, so you can send your donations to there if you want to support the channel. Now, I have a guest with me, a very special guest. Like me, he's not a cowboy, he's a professional. He knows the system inside out. As you all know, I'm just winging it. Daniel, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yep. Good afternoon, all. My name's Daniel Ryan from a firm called McKenzie McKenzie is a professional McKenzie FRIEND family law practice, and that's a bit of a mouthful. What that means is we are the viable alternative to solicitors. We are significantly cheaper, and I like to believe that we care significantly more. So when you're entertaining having to go into family court, and I trust that's not something that any of you ever have to do, but where you're entertaining going into family court, you need to consider solicitors as an option, as a very real option, but you also need to consider McKenzie FRIEND to see whether McKenzie FRIEND is going to be right for you.
Right, so let's strip it back and make it a bit simple, Dan, because look, I remember Mr. Ryan, I'll address you as. Now, when I first came into all of this, I read the term McKenzie FRIEND, so I went online. I thought, what do you do? Family court. I saw the name term McKenzie FRIEND. So I said to a mate of mine, I said to her at the time, I need to get hold of this McKenzie fella. Who is he? Have you got his number? Where do we find his number? Then I understood the term McKenzie FRIEND after a bit more research. So just explain, what is a McKenzie FRIEND?
Okay, a little bit of history. McKenzie FRIEND it came from a situation that happened in the early 1970s, 1971. A guy goes into court on his own and takes with him a friend of his. I'll keep it very, very simple. Takes with him a friend of his who has some legal knowledge. And he says to the judge, I would like this guy, my friend, to support me. And the judge immediately says, no, that's not how it works here. You either bring a solicitor in, you bring a barrister in, or you come in on your own. That is how it is. So this individual goes off to appeal court, appeals that decision in court and says that he has the common law right to be supported by somebody in court. Out of that term, we get McKenzie FRIEND, because the guy who was supporting him was a guy called McKenzie. So out of here we get McKenzie's FRIEND, which is an individual that you can take into court who does not or is not recognized by the court as having legal qualification, but hopefully has some experience of the family court mechanism.
Okay, Dan, so that's what a McKenzie FRIEND is. And if you find yourself in a situation where you need to enter family court, I highly recommend you can firstly represent yourself, litigate in person. If you're not comfortable being on your own, get hold of someone like Mr. Ryan here, a good McKenzie FRIEND. And also, there are a lot of various McKenzie FRIENDs out there. So do a bit of research, it's difficult, I know, try and find someone credible. Now, Daniel, next question, right? So you find yourself in a situation, you're going to enter family court, you've been served the usual non-mol, or you've lost access to your children, you find yourself in this horrific situation. First and foremost, you're panicked, you're upset, emotions are high, as you know. People and everyone you go to around you say, oh, this is your kids that are involved. Make sure you get a lawyer. Make sure you get a barrister. Don't worry about the money. This is your children. You know, that fear mongering now. Mm-hmm. So when someone says that, what would you say to them, as in, because people have this fantasy that lawyer, barrister, safe, secure bet. What is a McKenzie FRIEND? Look, your kids are concerned, hence, it's a bit tricky. Do you want to risk it? So do you want to just somehow reassure people as to what difference a lawyer can make that a McKenzie FRIEND can't?
Okay. First step in that process, where you're finding yourself heading towards family court and you are panicking, first step, take a breath, relax. Now consider the options. A solicitor. A solicitor obviously is legally trained. A solicitor is recognised by the court. A solicitor will understand family law. When he gets into the court, he will be able to speak on your behalf. That is his primary role, is to be able to speak on your behalf and explain to the court what it is you are trying to achieve, or what it is you are in conflict with. A McKenzie FRIEND, that alternative, equally qualified in terms of their experience of the family law firm. And I'm, for now, just for the purposes of the rest of this chit-chat, if I address myself about professional McKenzie FRIENDs, guys who actually do this for a living, because they differentiate themselves from, obviously there are a bunch of McKenzie FRIENDs out there. So let's just work on with professional McKenzie FRIENDs who understand the family court system and understand the protocols. So You go with that McKenzie friend as an alternative. He will understand the process and the steps you're about to go through, because what you're looking for in family law is you aren't necessarily, and don't immediately assume you're looking for a solicitor, because most of the steps in family law are actually already laid out and you don't require much legal input. What you're actually looking for, just to use a mountaineering analogy, is you're looking for a Sherpa. You're looking for somebody who is going to guide you, who is going to stay alongside you and explain the next step.
Right, yes. At a fraction of the cost.
At a fraction of the cost.
So let's just clarify that again. As I've mentioned in previous videos, for example, if you went to a solicitor to fill out a C100 application, which is a child access form, if I'm correct.
Yep.
Now, you go to a solicitor, you will give the solicitor this information, he will fill it out on your behalf, and in London, they go up to from £1,000 to £1,500 to fill out a C100. Now, if you're not confident in doing it yourself, you could very much do it yourself. So you'd get a McKenzie friend to help you fill one out. He'd do it on your behalf, and he'd help you write, say, position statements and whatnot to submit alongside that. What sort of money would that cost, Dan, if you don't mind me asking you that
No,
on
not
camera?
at all. Not at all.
So if someone, they're not, a lot of people, this is East London, people ain't flush, they're struggling, solicitors asking for 1,000, 1,500 quid. They're not sure how to do it themselves. They come to you. Like you said, McKenzie friends are not necessarily all about the money. What sort of money would that cost them to get them through that step? So give us a little example.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a sweeping statement, it is going to cost you significantly less than £500 to do that process. And within that £500 is going to be included your court fees, because there are court fees when you make an application to court.
Yes.
And those court fees in a C100, using the analogy the example that we're looking at now, a C100 comes with a £232 court fee at the date of this this broadcast. Okay. So it comes with £232. So a McKenzie friend is probably going to charge you another £100, £150, £200 maybe on top, depending where you are in the country, for helping you prepare that document and then submit it to court. So as I say, significantly less than £500. The solicitor, as we've pointed out already, is anywhere between £1,000 and £2,500 plus the court costs.
Right, that'd be separate.
Separate to their fee.
Of course it is, yes. Yeah. Okay, so, well, there you go. Look, that right there shows you the difference on why you should go to a McKenzie friend rather than a lawyer. And also the court processes, as Mr. Ryan has mentioned, are set. So a solicitor and barrister, can they get a different outcome, let's say, if they were representing you? Because this is the bits that the mechanics people don't understand, yeah? The family court processes, if I'm correct, are set. So the lawyer cannot, doesn't matter how expensive your lawyer or barrister is, do they have any leverage? Like, is that, because someone would assume if you're spending, £5,000 for a court hearing compared to, say, a few hundred quid, surely that money's going to bring you some advantage.
In my experience, in the many years that I've been doing this now, your outcome, the result of your case, is driven by the circumstances of your case. It is not driven by how much money you have spent on the legal or on the McKenzie friend or on the barrister or on the counsel who has supported you. They have a role to play, and a good barrister or a good McKenzie friend or a good solicitor will assist the process on your behalf. But it's the circumstances of your case that will drive your outcome, not who it is who stood alongside you.
Okay, as you know, Mr. Ryan, since I've entered into this space and seen all the horror that goes on, and hiding in plain sight, which we'll go into that in a minute. But what I find personally, and after the horror story that I've heard from fathers where they have had lawyers and barristers, you go to them, they generally, first thing you said was take a breath, relax. Most of them, they make you panic more. They give you a bit more panic. They get your adrenaline up. They get your anxiety up. And before you leave, they give you a little bit of calmness just before they give you a bill and say a cost, yeah? I mean, am I missing something here? Is this done specifically to keep you on edge, then give you a little bit of hope to then be able to get you to hand money over? I personally think it's a scam. Straight.
There is, far be it from me to disrespect the solicitor field, but there is a practice within solicitors particularly in family law, I find, where they feed the fear, where they tell you a worst case scenario, they explain to you all the reasons why it is you need to take a series of not necessarily relevant steps within your case, and each of those steps comes with a price, comes with a
Right.
fee,
Okay.
in order to get to an outcome. And often I find with solicitors is that they will hit every case with a sledgehammer because sledgehammers are expensive,
Ah.
where ideally and necessarily they could have tackled the same case with a feather duster.
Right. I see. That makes sense. So they go to extreme case scenario, which cost maximum money to try and obviously, and they play on your fear. So that's the first thing I want people to know. I'm not saying it. This is someone who is involved and works in the field. So you've heard it, directly. Now, let's try and move on a little bit, Mr. Ryan. Yeah. Before I jump any further, right? Before we go any further into the mechanics of the family court, what is going on, right? So, for example, like I am 41 years old. It's hard to believe I know, but I am 41. Yeah. Now, once I entered this, or when I first met you, again, I had this presumption, like probably most of your clients, that yes, we'll go to court and there's law and order and process and justice will be served. And I'm a father and I have rights. We're in England, rule Britannia, laws and processes. Now, you told me from what you know, with all your experience of court, how the hell did this happen, this delusion? How has this delusion been kept alive in normal general public until they end up there?
Yeah, to be honest, until they end up into the dark world that is the family court. I think everybody in this country believes that the justice system, that the court system, regardless of whether you're entertaining the civil court, the family court, or the criminal court, I think everybody starts with a belief that court system is upright, it's robust, it's fit for purpose, and it's equipped to deliver the job that it's there to deliver.
Yes.
Everybody starts with that premise, and that's as good a premise as any to start with. Unfortunately, it's not. I'm not suggesting for one moment that the court system is corrupt, because it's certainly not. But what I am saying is that the court system, and let's bring it down just to family law now, the family law court is so strapped for resources, for staff, for judges, for court ushers, for clerks, for admin staff. They are so strapped for resource to complete cases that cases are being neglected. The outcome of cases is being delayed so dramatically that we're impacting on relationships. Or cases are being accelerated because the court just wants to get them through and get them out. And they are tipping them out at the far end with an outcome before they are ready, before they've explored the full circumstance.
Okay, right. Okay, but the counter to that is that how long has the family court system been running? Let's go there. 40 years?
The court system, obviously the court system in this country has been running for hundreds of years. The family court in its current form is probably 40 years old.
Right. Okay. So my point is then, this issue with the staffing and the resources, has that been there for 40 years, or is it since COVID, or is it just recent? This is the recent.
It's
got worse.
It's got worse. Yeah, it's been an ongoing dilapidation. It's been an ongoing erosion as the years have gone by. As respective governments have come and gone, they've chosen not to invest in the court system. They've chosen not to renew. We won't renew the chair. We won't renew the judge. We won't renew the usher. We'll let people make do. And there was a major decision a few years ago, about 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, where the government decided to cut back the funding that was available to judges in order that judges could not sit 5 days a week. And they reduced judges in order that judges could only sit 3 days a week. Now that's great, saves the country some money. The downside of that is we've just made the court a 3-day process, not a 5-day process. So we can no longer have the capacity to deal with 5 days worth of cases for one judge. That one judge is now only available for 3 days. That was the impact. That was probably the major impact in recent years, which has
caused the backlog.
Yes, which is causing a massive backlog currently.
Okay, right. Okay, so now that you've said that, right? So the judges are not being renewed, yeah? Do you think the judges are outdated in how they view cases and the roles of men and women? Let's get into a little bit more nitty-gritty in that sense, because this is where it gets
Yeah.
Every father, I'm sure, is out there complaining that he didn't get justice, is biased. We know, we keep hearing this. We know this horror story after horror story, the sort of allegations that are made and pandered to, and hence obviously found guilty on balance of probability, which we can talk about that in a minute. But before you go there, do you think the judges are outdated, or the system in itself is not kept up with modern times, the roles of man and woman, the new ideologies creeping into society? What would you say on that from a professional perspective?
I think there are issues. I think that judges in the family court now are challenged by what it is that they are trying to achieve. And I think because obviously the age profile of judges in the family court, just by the nature of what they need to do to become a judge, they are at the upper end of life's scale, let's call it that. And as a result of that, they come with an attitude, because at the end of the day, every judge is a human, and they have their own view on life. And okay, while they are there to exercise the law, which ultimately they do, but they're also there to form an opinion, because the family court is based on opinion. And so I think there is a degree of issue within the family court in terms of attitude, in terms of opinion. And I think that is impacting on outcomes now. I think the other issue that we have in family court at the moment, so aside from the time constraint that we've already talked about and the lack of resources, et cetera, is that there is an issue between mum and dad in the family court, and nitty gritty. The issue between mum and dad in the family court is, and I will be shot down in flames by 1,000 different legal representatives when I make this comment, but I'm going to make it anyway. Mum will always stand a better outcome in family court than dad.
Right. Yes.
That's a fact. That is a
It's
fact.
just a fact.
Yes, it's a fact. So we can't get around it. We can't go through it. That is the fact. That the statistics say that mum stands a better chance of getting a better outcome in the family court than dad does. And that's not fair. That's not right. That's a symptom of where we've come from. That's a societal symptom. That's an attitude in society that says that that mum is mum and dad is kind of the lesser parent. That's a society issue. But that translates into the family court.
Right, okay, I see. All right, Dan, that's quite a good opening introduction. We'll go to a short break and we'll be back in a minute. Right, welcome back. Right, Mr. Ryan, I think that was quite a good opening introduction. A lot of information there. Now, let's talk about time delays, right? Because I myself, Mr. Ryan, have been dealing with a client who put an application in approximately 15 months ago, a child access application. And when he went for his first hearing, they got to the window and they were turned away again. The judge wasn't available that day. We went on the wrong day, or we went on the right day, but it was the wrong day for the judge. Not available, sent away. Now, since then, it's been 15 months before even the first hearing. What do you think of that? And obviously, during that time, he has had no contact with his children. So then the other argument is, after 15 months of lost contact with a child, is there any point going back to court, or might as well just say, listen, damage is done. Kids are effectively gone. In a child's life, 15 months in a child's life under 10 is more like, it's like 5 years in child terms, yeah? Is there any point in that father continuing with the court system? What do you think is happening to the children whilst all this is going on?
Okay, let's unpack that. The court system, as I've said already, the court system is so congested because of a lack of resource that cases are taking ridiculously long as delays between hearings. The average delay between one hearing and a second hearing at the moment is about 4 months. In the northern courts, a lot longer down here in the southern courts, down here in the London courts. And that is hugely concerning, because issue number one, if we come back to the children for a minute, issue number one is your ability to manage a legal case that you lose all momentum after the first hearing, and that momentum just dies away for 3 or 4 months until you kick it up again at the next hearing. That is an issue. In the legal world, that is an issue, because you're trying to fire some motivation and enthusiasm back into a hearing, and that's difficult. Everybody is stale. Everybody's forgotten exactly quite why they're there, and so the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes of every hearing is you reminding each other why it is you're there. That's so from a court point of view, that's not great. But let's look at the children. So we've been to a hearing, and that hearing has taken place, and we've just got the date for the next hearing, and the next hearing is in 4 months' time, 5 months' time, 6 months' time, or using your analogy, a year's time. Okay. I've got, and again, you've just touched on this, we've got a 10-year-old child. That 10-year-old child has not seen their parent for 15 months, using your example. 15 months. 15 months of a 10-year-old's life is pushing 20% of their entire life. So if we take that to a 50-year-old, let's just give ourselves an example. If we take that to a 50-year-old, that is 15 years of a 50-year-old's life. So that's the analogy to draw. You know, if a 10-year-old doesn't see their parents for 15 months to 2 years, that is like a 50-year-old not seeing somebody that they care for 10 to 15 years.
Wow.
And that brings some focus. And I use that example a lot, because people say, oh, well, yeah, but it was only 18 months, or it was only 12 months, or it was only... I said, yeah, but hang on a minute. It was 12 months or 18 months in a 5-year-old's life, in a 10-year-old's life. And that is a mighty long time.
Yes.
That is a huge chunk of their entire life.
Yes.
I have a case, and I won't touch on many cases this evening, but I have a case of a guy whose children, he's seeing his children in a contact centre for various reasons. Doesn't matter whether that's right or wrong, but he's seeing his children in a contact centre. He has seen his children in a contact centre for 2 hours every 2 weeks for 3.5 years.
Oh my God.
His children are 6 and 7 years old. So the youngest one, certainly the 6-year-old, all she can remember is seeing her dad in a contact centre. She has no recollection of seeing her dad out on the street.
Wow, yeah.
So let's talk about, what does that mean in terms of impact and damage? What that means in terms of damage is that we are, and there's no escaping this, we are damaging the relationship between parents and children, because we are isolating those two groups, the parents and the children. We are isolating them. We are forcing an isolation from each other. And when we do eventually get back into court, and the court says, well, okay, now we're going to sort this matter out, and there we go, we've dealt with it, off you go and get on with your life. The first year of your life is you trying to rebuild your relationship and your parental bond with your child, and you may not do that. You may not be able to get that back.
Yeah, so, okay, look, we know the devastation this does to a fully grown adult, this separation anxiety, this yearning to be with, their child. A child, as I've said, or how I've articulated it, is a child can't express those emotions, of mourning and grief and that loss. They can't make sense of it, and they don't see that parent. So let's not even talk about alienation, no alienation, nothing. They just know there's one parent not there, and they're a child, they're under 10, they can't articulate it. Do you know, or do you have any insight into what this does to a child's mental and emotional health? And can they recover from this really ever?
Well, it's damaging. I mean, and it really does boil down to the child as to how
resilient.
And how crippling that damage is. To a child who is already sensitive, to a child who is already suffering with anxiety issues, to a child who's already immature, quite young, the damage of losing a parent, particularly a parent that they had a bond with for a period of time, be that 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, and then they lose that parent. That is akin to grief. That is akin to death.
Mourning, yes.
Let's say the child goes, and the child is totally unaware of this, but the child goes into, a state of mourning.
But he doesn't know it's mourning. He just knows hurting.
Just knows, I'm hurting, I'm in pain. Excuse me. I'm hurting, I'm in pain. I have no idea why. My parent's not here, whether it's dad or whether it's mum. My parent's not here, and that hurts. And that hurts, and if we liken back to our own childhoods, and we reflect on how we, if we can remember, those of us who aren't quite as I'm a bit older than you, but we reflect back on our parents and you think, well, how did I feel? If there was any periods of time where my parents weren't there, that sense of missing them will amplify that sense of missing them by not 1 day or 2 days because they've gone away for the weekend. Amplify that by a year.
Yeah, it's bad.
And the damage potentially is not fixable.
Yeah.
It is potentially that child loses that relationship forever. And I have too many examples within my own practice. I have too many examples of parents, who lose their relationship with their children. And here we are, a year on from the final hearing, 2 years on from the final hearing, and we still have not got it back.
Okay, look, I was going to ask you another question, but because of what you said, I'm going to ask you what was triggered my chain of thought now. So let's say relationships rocky, mum and dad aren't getting on. 9 out of 10 cases, dad somehow ended up outside the home. And correct me if I'm wrong in again saying, I've said this a few times, but you might as well correct me while you're here. Father's rights in the Children's Act are abolished. Am I correct? Father has no automatic rights.
Father's rights are compromised. In the Child Act 1989, father's rights are very compromised. The Child Act 1989 was written around a mother.
Oh, God, fair enough. Look, I think he's answered it right here. So there you go. So relationships rocky, let's say one party or the other calls the police turn up 9 out of 10 times. We know what the score is. Police will ask father to leave the house or say, look, to avoid any conflict. He walks out. Next thing you know, if mother files a report of some sort of abuse or allegation, or let's say she's coerced into it by some legal aid laws or something like that, because that will best place her in a good position to become the resident parent. And once you are the resident parent, you will automatically, obviously, secure the property and the home with immediate effect because, obviously, children need housing. So father's walked out. He's found himself there. Now, we know now if this drags on for a year or two, father potentially could be spending the rest of his life trying to rebuild his bond. So in that moment, should father fire off a C100? So let's just say this, if no allegations are made or there's nothing like that, but in order to keep the peace, he gets asked to leave, but there's nothing's come through yet, because this is where the problem is. You fire off a C100, she gets a letter from court. She thinks, oh no, I better go see a lawyer. Then lawyer could potentially give her bad advice and say, no, you need to claim X, Y, and Z. Or does father, so he risks doing that if no action's been taken against him, but he doesn't know, that could come later on. Or he's left, he's got these allegations placed against him, or he's been arrested for some sort of abuse. Should he not take the risk? Well, what I'm saying is, should he not waste time, not take the risk? Should he fire off a C100 straight away, regardless?
I would say in 90% of the cases, yes. I think once father is outside the home, regardless of how he got there, once he's outside the home and the door's been closed on him, he needs to start to fix that situation. And he is not going to fix that situation, from my experience. He is not going to fix that situation by waiting for somebody to calm down and have a chat.
Right, okay.
So he needs to start to engage the process. And the first step of the process, as you said already, is the completion of a C100 application for a child arrangement order. He needs to start that process because time's ticking. And the person on the other side of the door, mum on the other side of the door, she now has control of the board.
Okay, so it goes back to what I've said. The one who acts first can get ahead.
Yes. Yep.
So let's say, okay, a hypothetical situation, mum and dad not getting along. Yeah, like the scenario I just said to you, right? Same scenario. Dad calls the police, says, I don't feel safe. There's a situation going on. Mum's been a bit unpredictable. Firstly, what's the chances of police saying to mum, calm down, you're clearly very excitable, we need you to leave the property? Or will they, in a lot of cases I hear, they will still look at dad and say, she's excitable because of you, so you still need to leave. Yeah, we know you got a black eye. We know there's blood pouring out your nose, but you're the problem, dad. I've heard a lot of cases like that. How can a father take control?
With difficulty.
All right, okay. So that is an uphill battle as well.
That is an uphill battle. In that scenario that you've just described, where clearly mother is the perpetrator, clearly mother is the one who's in the wrong. The police's view, which again, we may see it as outdated, but the police's view is that mother should be with the children. And so the police will often say, well, look, we need to take the heat out of this situation. And the way we take the heat out of this situation, dad, is you leave.
And he's lost all, so as soon as he leaves, effectively he's lost all his rights.
Yeah. Well, he is certainly compromised.
He's compromised.
Yeah.
He didn't have much right to start with, but the little that he had, he's compromised that as well now.
Yeah.
So he's in a no-win situation. So, and this is where I speak to a lot of fathers. They've been, they're knocked for six. They don't know, pillar to post. They don't know what's going on. So if you find yourself in that situation, ultimately, we've all been in relationships. You can have arguments. Things can get heated. It's normal. It does happen. Yeah, in a normal relationship, and then the police get involved. What is one to do when he keeps finding himself in that situation in a relationship? Is it best to end it himself before any police get involved? That way, if the situation can't escalate, what do you think? You give us some advice on this.
Dare I say, every situation is different because unfortunately, from my point of view, every situation that I get involved with is a horrible situation where people are fighting. But the reason that I get involved is because people are fighting. So for every situation that that involves somebody like me or like a solicitor, I kind of hope that there are a few situations out there where people are sorting themselves out because they're a little more civilized, for want of a better word. And so when they come to me, I look at them and say, well, okay, this is a conflict situation. We need to sort this out. So going back to your example, so we've got a relationship. It's going south. It's starting to get very messy. There's a lot of shouting, and the shouting is starting to lean towards perhaps a little bit of pushing and shoving, perhaps a little bit of hurling the coffee mug across the kitchen. When we get to that stage, alarm bells should be ringing, and for two reasons. Number one, and let's just use Dad as the example. Number one, Dad, it's going to be your fault.
Dad, did you hear that? Yeah.
It doesn't matter what happens; it will be your fault.
Dad, right? Because, remember that.
Because say the reason that the coffee cup was thrown at you was because you said something upsetting and you deserved it.
Dad, you deserved it.
So live with that. So that's issue number one. Issue number two: that situation is escalating. It is not going to get any better.
Okay, fair
and
enough.
You are going to potentially, one of those parents who is not the perpetrator, so whichever one is just on the sharp end of the abuse, is going to potentially find themselves either injured, or worse still, the whole situation is turned around and they find themselves in a set of handcuffs being walked out to a police car. Because that situation is escalating. So if you can see that your relationship is going south and it's starting to get a little bit physical, starting to get a little bit more than just shouting and swearing at each other. Yes, okay, we'll go with excitable. At that point, you need to start to be entertaining your options of how to get out.
Okay, what is a father's options? Because this is where it's such a grey area. Nothing's happened yet, but you can see where this is headed. At that stage, even when you go out to find information, very difficult. You get so many mixed sort of advice. You hear so many things online about rights and X, Y, and Z. Then you end up there and realize all that was absolute rubbish. I don't know who put that on the internet. Yeah. So what are a father's options specifically in that situation? And how can he become a resident parent at that situation? Like, is it possible? Give us an insight into that.
It is possible. Piece of advice number one in that situation: go and talk to somebody who is legally experienced to be able to talk to you about your options. I can share a series of possibles this evening, but it's not unique to your situation. So when your situation is going south, you need to go and find yourself a me, or find yourself a solicitor, or find yourself another McKenzie friend or another legal, and have the conversation. Share your circumstances, and they will tell you what your options are. Broadly speaking, your options are stay and see what happens. It's never going to get better.
Okay.
Leave and wait patiently until mother, because we're using the dad-mother situation here. So wait patiently until mother calms down, and then she rings you and says, let's have a chat. That's very unlikely to ever happen, in my experience. Your third option is, having spoken to a professional, the professional then contacts mother on your behalf and says, we kind of need to decide what we're going to do here, because this situation has gone beyond being resolved by us just having a good old chinwag. But as I say, they're very general, they're very sweeping, because as I say, it is very specific to your set of circumstances. So find yourself someone to talk to.
So yeah, so in reality, I mean, like you said, for dad, because the societal position is, especially if you got, okay, so if you're in a relationship with kids, if you're just two of you, it doesn't matter. Your dad can get up and go, or mother can go, vice versa. It's not that damaging. It's when the kids are involved. So dad's options really are ultimately very limited, however you look at it, because the societal position is the children are going to be, it's accepted by all sort of, let's say, like the police, the courts, that dad will be walking out or dad is going to be non-resident parent. It's just an accepted position.
It is an accepted position. And sorry, I didn't answer your question. I'm going to. Primary carer. So we want dad to become the primary carer of those children. Let me give you a heads up. The chance of that happening is highly, 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 and I can't say that enough, rare.
Okay, I thought it was possible, but fine. It's possible, but not that.
Yeah,
rare.
I was going to say it is possible. It is. All things are possible. You can win the lottery, but lots of people don't.
Yeah.
So it's rare that dad gets primary carer status.
Resident parent.
Yeah, to stay with the children, to keep the children with him. Right. Mum goes off and does something else, and they battle it out in court. In the years that I've been doing this, I can probably think of no more than probably 30 cases, maybe 40 cases out of hundreds, where dad has been the resident parent or the primary carer during the course of the legal process.
Right.
It is very rare. The court just have this view.
Mum and
it's children and mum, children and mum, children and mum, children and mum. Children need their mother.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let me put a scenario to you then, yeah? A situation, because whilst you are still living with the kids, yeah, you still have, how can I put it, a status of a parent while you're still in the family home, yeah? So in theory, things are rocky at home. I can see where this is headed. You know, with some of the stuff I've talked about in my previous videos, coercive control, dad's a prisoner in his own life effectively because he knows the system we're up against believes mum is a victim, and mum stays with the children and dad is going to be labeled as abuser, yeah? So in that scenario, is it possible that father one day gets in the car with the kids and disappears? Is that not making him resident parent? Because if the police are called and they pull him up, I'm out with my children, and I'm legally allowed to be with them now. They don't have powers to actually stop you because there's nothing against you at that stage.
There is nothing against you at that stage. You have parental responsibility. There's a legal phrase. You have parental responsibility from the moment your children are born. And it's only a court that can take that parental responsibility away from you. And that very, very, very rarely happens. So, using your example, you put your children into the car and then take off down the street and you get waved over by a police officer. Because mum has rang the police and said,
you've kidnapped the children.
You've abducted, you've stolen, you've kidnapped your own children.
Yes.
Your own children. Once the police officer has finished smirking about the fact that you've just been accused of abducting your own children, you explain to the police officer, at home the situation is volatile, at home the situation is abusive, the situation is physical. I have decided to leave the family home because that is in the best interest of everybody concerned, and I am going to stay with my parents or with my brother or wherever it is you're headed, or I've rented the house down the street, whatever it might be. And in my view, in my opinion, my children are best in my care.
Right.
That's what I'm doing. Now, that police officer will do one of two things. He'll either agree with you, which would be nice, and tell you to be about your business and get on with it, or he will object. And he will say that he would like you and the children to return to the family home invariably with him, and probably he'll undoubtedly have another officer with him. Return to the family home and let's talk about this.
Right. Okay.
That is certainly a more likely outcome rather than just wave you on. And when you get back to the family home, your battle has then started again.
Yeah, you could then lose. Yeah, so you've lost all leverage.
You've lost your leverage because now suddenly you're both on the same playing field, and one of you carries the title of mum.
It's game over,
and the other one doesn't.
Okay, but can the police, if you refuse to go back, they can't force you, can they? Because legally you've done nothing wrong. You've done nothing wrong. Powers over you.
They can't force you unless mother has lodged an allegation of abuse.
So, okay.
If mother has said, He's taken the children, and on his way out, he hit me, or he hit one of the kids, or the kids were screaming hysterically as he dragged them into the car and forced them in. At that point, the police officer, from a safeguarding issue, has obviously got to contemplate that.
So basically, the trump card comes out again, which is the abuse card.
Yes, yeah.
So once that trump ace card is pulled, mate, you've won the table. It's over.
Domestic abuse.
Yeah, great.
It is the joker in the pack.
Okay, right. Okay, so let's say the police then pull you over. The kids look seemingly happy. Everything looks hunky-dory. And he says there's no sign of abuse. Hence, I can't act on that, but I can advise you, can you come home with us? Can you, if you stand your ground, can you refuse if the police does a safeguarding check on the spot to the children and yourself? Children look happy with daddy. Technically, does he still have powers to pull you back, even though the abuse allegations were there?
No. The only way he can take you back is if he opts to arrest you.
And he has to see, say, the kid's crying or some mark on the children.
There has to be some
like
basis for that. So you can say to him, with all due respect, I believe it is best for now for me to carry on down the road to my parents' house. This is the address. My brother's house, my sister's house, wherever it is I'm headed, just to take the heat of this situation. And that, as a parent, is what I'm choosing to do. Unless he has got real grounds.
Yes, unless he sees a kid bleeding or crying or black eye or marks.
Or indeed mother's back at the house and she's bleeding.
Yes, obviously.
At that point, he's got some grounds. Outside of that, he has no grounds and he can only recommend.
Okay, so this is exactly what I'm talking about. People don't have this information. They don't know. That's the only time as a father that you have some leverage. Again, as I've said, and a lot of men don't tend to do this because they don't. All the fathers I've dealt with, look, even once they've had allegations placed against them, what they've said is, I would have never dreamt of doing this the other way around. I would never do it. Like, it seems to be mothers I don't know unless I missed something, but mothers seem to be very comfortable placing allegations of abuse on the end of a relationship. Is that just me thinking that, or 90% non-resident parent are fathers? Yeah, was it an accident? And the amount of abuse claims that I hear, and obviously, and I'm not talking about the legit ones. Yeah, there's legit victims out there, non-gendered. Abuse is abuse, and victims need support. Yeah, regardless of the gender of the victim or the perpetrator. Yeah. But I'm talking about all the cases that I've dealt with or I speak to, and all the hundreds of cases you've dealt with. There are allegations of abuse without any basis or evidence, and anyone with half a brain knows that, listen, the story's just got a little bit carried away just to give it a little spice. And we know the courts absolutely pander to this. Why is that? And obviously, let's talk about the how you are proved to be deemed guilty on the balance of probability. So those who have no dealings with the court, they still have this fantasy that when we get into court, the grown-ups will look at this and say, clearly this man is no danger. He's been with these kids for 10 years. He didn't suddenly wake up one morning and become a serial killer effectively. And you waiting for these grown-ups, and then you realize after 2 or 3 hearings, there are no grown-ups. They love all this. They pander to all of this. What would you say about all that?
I'd say let's go to a break.
Okay, good stuff. Right, we are back. We are now going to jump straight into what we went into before the break.
Yep.
Domestic abuse, the abuse card, the family court madness, the pandering to various wild allegations.
Okay, let's say this at the outset. We do not, either in my professional practice or as me as a human being, or indeed as Brooke as a human being, we do not condone domestic abuse.
Absolutely.
We do not condone domestic abuse, domestic violence, sexual violence, emotional violence. We damn all of those practices.
Totally against it, yes.
And they are abhorrent. But here is the problem. In the family law, in the family court system, domestic abuse has become, in the pack of cards, in the hand that mum has to play, domestic abuse has become the joker. It is the card you play to ultimately win the game. And because it is the most difficult card to disprove.
Right, okay.
When mum says, this happened within the relationship, and this might be he hit me, he intimidated me, he controlled me financially because he was the breadwinner, for argument's sake, not necessarily in every scenario, but he's the breadwinner. He controlled what I could do financially. He decided what we were going to do. And unfortunately, when he decides what we're going to do, whilst that may be perfectly natural within the relationship, because that's just how the dynamic is, when the relationship goes south, suddenly that becomes an issue. Suddenly that becomes coercive control, controlling behavior, domestic abuse. So the domestic abuse card in court, there are too many occasions, unfortunately, in my experience, where parties will walk into court and one of them plays, there's my joker, there's the domestic abuse card, now I'm just going to stand back while you hand me all the prizes.
Well, out of the blue, you're saying unexpected.
Yep. I've had many cases where they've played the domestic abuse card literally when you've strolled into a hearing, surmising it's going to be very low level, very unexciting, just two people who've had a bit of a tussle, and you're going to sort it out. Suddenly they go, oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, he hit me. Hit me.
Oh God.
I forgot to mention that. I'll mention it now.
Okay, so do you think, because it's last minute, do you think they were potentially advised to come out with this saying, look, if you want to win, we know you didn't want to go down here, but this is a card, it is the joker card, you want to get ahead, then we need to do this. Yeah. Do you think that someone must have advised them to do that? Do you see what I'm saying? Or is it, okay, let me put it this way. As a party representing that party, it's in their best interest to get their client the best position they can, yes? Based on that, you'd present all options to the client. And if there's one option that looks appealing to the client, assuming they will pick that because it'll work in their favor. Would that be a fair analogy?
I would say that there are probably unscrupulous legal representatives who will have that conversation.
Right.
Who will say, we need to turn up the heat in this set of circumstances in order to ensure that you are going to be in the winning corner.
Right. Yes. Okay.
That is real. That is very real.
Okay.
The other side of the issue with domestic abuse, as I was saying briefly a minute ago, is that once you've voiced domestic abuse in the family court, two issues. Number one, it's awfully hard to take it back, which means you've got to front it out. Number two, from a family court perspective, it's awfully hard to prove. 2 years ago, I think it was a Wednesday, I can't be sure, he hit me on the back of the head with a hairbrush while I was going into the bathroom. How do you prove that? He says, no, I didn't. She says, yes, you did.
No one was there. You can't.
They're always there. So we then arrive at a concept within family court that we call the balance of probability. And hold on tight, because it's complex. Let's go to criminal court for a minute. In criminal court, there is a very basic threshold. You're either guilty or you're innocent. And that threshold is arrived at by the presentation of evidence. Evidence is presented to the court through the purposes of a trial, and be it a jury or indeed be it a judge or be it a magistrate, they draw a conclusion that says, based on that evidence, you are very clearly guilty. If I cannot say that you are very clearly guilty, I have no choice but to declare you innocent. I may not believe it as a human being, but on the basis of the evidence presented to me, I have to declare you guilty or innocent. It's simple, simple threshold. Family law works in a different way. Family law doesn't use the guilty-innocent scenario. Family law uses a principle called the balance of probability. What the balance of probability says is, I'm going to listen, as the judge, I'm going to listen to your account of what happened. And then I'm going to listen to his or her account of what happened. And then I'm going to decide which of you I believe. And that is it. And based on that, I will then make a decision based on who it is I believe, who is the more credible in front of me today. And that is referred to as the balance of probability. So you don't need to present too much evidence. You just have to be able to demonstrate by what you say And some of the facts that you suggest, you have to demonstrate to a judge that she sees you as credible.
Okay, but the thing is this, Dan, with that, yeah. Okay, I understand that, yeah, but even when, so let's say the person claiming the abuse cannot present any evidence, but the judge needs to see them as credible, yeah. I know of cases where the father has proved by evidence that this is a lie, that mothers, unfortunately, and he disproved, I'm talking 3 out of 4, 5 out of 6, 6 out of 7, 9 out of 10 allegations, disproved with evidence. Judge found one that couldn't prove because of his scenario lie, and he used that one to find him guilty at a fact find. But even when he disproved 5 or 6, because I was slightly, unfortunately, under the impression a little while ago that once you disprove one allegation, all the other allegations have lost some credibility.
Yeah.
But many cases, once they've even disproved some of them with evidence, judges quickly to try and brush it under the carpet. And this is a theme and a pattern. So obviously every case is different and complex, but the general theme and pattern that you keep hearing, they quickly brush that under the carpet, move on to an allegation that can't disprove, to then find mum, obviously, a victim. That is a general trend and pattern. So it's like the judge has been told he has to try and find something to make mum look like the victim. Would I be correct in saying that? From your experience, would you say that is a common theme?
That scenario is not uncommon. It's not uncommon. And what you were describing there is what we refer to as the Lucas direction. So mum puts on the table, and we're using mum. It could have been dad, but let's use mum. Mum puts on the table 10 allegations. There's 10 things that I've said that dad has done during the course of our relationship, which I regard as abuse. Dad presents evidence, using your example. Dad presents evidence to categorically remove 9 of them and say, I can prove without a shadow of a doubt that those 9 allegations did not take place. So we're now left with 1. We're now left with the hairbrush walking into the bathroom.
Okay, yeah.
That dad can't prove because he was there, she was there. Well, he may not have been there because he says it never happened. But they can't prove that. The judge listens to mum's account, and mum cries a lot and says she can still feel the pain. She can still feel the humiliation. She still suffers from the trauma of that incident because she feared where it might lead. She feared the escalation. Dad has got nothing else to say apart from the fact it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. The judge decides that on the balance of probability, he believes that mum is probably telling the truth. She doesn't have to be telling the truth. She is probably telling the truth. That is the balance of probability. So, if you remember, this trial started with 10 allegations. The judge dad successfully removed 9 through his proof. The judge has 1 left. From a judge's point of view, he is now trying, through this trial, 1 allegation. And he finds that allegation in favour of mum.
I see how I'm flipping it.
Everything you've done before is relevant.
You're right, because he's just proved it. It's not an allegation anymore.
He's just proved that dad is a perpetrator of domestic violence because he hit mum with a hairbrush. What he doesn't prove, and what he chooses not to prove, is that mum's a liar. Because there were 9 other occasions that mum made stuff up.
Yes.
And here's why. Because the Lucas direction, which is something I referenced a minute ago, the Lucas direction is an article of law that says just because a party lies about something in court, it does not mean that everything else they say is also a lie. And a judge cannot assume that if they've lied here, all of these points are lies as well. She cannot make that assumption because that is the Lucas direction. He has to take each statement they make in isolation.
Okay, so based on the Lucas direction, can the dad use that to his favour as well? There
is an argument that dad can flip the card back and say, well, look, let's look at probability. 9 times I have demonstrated that mum was lying about this scenario. This is the 10th time. This is 10% of her entire argument that I cannot demonstrate. and this is where a sort of a decent representative working with you, a decent support working with you, will fight this corner. Is it surely not worth considering that on this one allegation, given that we have already worked our way through 9, mum is possibly lying? Is that not a consideration that is worth having? And that boils down to your ability to deliver a submission argument.
Okay, that's one way of looking at it, yeah. So let's say, what was I going to say? Dad makes 10. Could Dad get away with the same? I'm saying. So let's say Dad makes 10 allegations. Mum somehow disproves Dad on 10 allegations. I'm pretty sure the judge will deem him not credible after the first one's disproved. That's what I'm saying. So that won't apply to Dad, will it?
No, it can apply. My opening statement with court, with every court case that I've ever been in, regardless of whether it's about a mum or about a dad or about children or about whatever, my opening comment is the same. The outcome of that trial is driven by A, the circumstances of the matter, B, the judge.
Okay, so
because judges are inconsistent.
Okay.
You can could put the same case in front of 3 different judges and get 3 different outcomes.
Fair enough.
Because they look at it differently.
Yes, so you could get lucky and get a fair judge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could get lucky, and they're out there. There are some fantastic judges out there. I have huge respect for a number of judges who are on the circuit currently.
So on a positive note, you can get lucky. There are some decent ones out there. Yeah, on a positive note. Right.
Yeah. So if we follow that through, because that suggests that there are some who aren't decent. What there are is we have some very fair judges who still have that desire to to fulfil the rule of law in a fair and equitable way, so everybody has the opportunity to be on a level playing field. That's one set of judges, and I kind of like to think that that's the majority of them. We then have a set of judges in the middle who are tired, who are a little bit jaded, and consequently they're not quite going through the motions, but they're not far off, in which case what you're going to get on the day is entirely driven by whether they had a decent night's sleep and whether yesterday's golf was a decent round. We then have a set at this end, which I'm kind of hoping is the minority, who arrive in the room with a view. And they've had that view for 30 years.
Okay, so yeah.
And that view may be pro-mum, that view may be pro-dad, that view may be pro the division of because obviously we deal with divorce as well in family law. So that view may be the pro division of assets in favour of mum every time. They arrive with a view and they manage every case to fit that view.
All right, okay, so let me throw something else out there that's been playing on my mind for ages. I keep forgetting. Right. In the scenario now with the sort of time and era we're living in, what happens if it's a relationship between 2 mums? Or 2 dads?
Yeah, as I say, and that is obviously we live in a real world, and those relationships are out there. And from a family court point of view, that becomes quite challenging.
Yes.
Because suddenly it's like, well, hang on a minute, you can't both be right. Whether it's 2 mums or 2 dads, 2 dads in the room, you can't both be wrong. We can't throw you both out. So it is difficult, but invariably at that point, because I would say the gender of the individuals is irrelevant. At that point, one of them in all relationships, be it two women, two guys, whatever it might be, somebody assumes the role of the primary carer, somebody assumes the role of the lesser carer.
No, but okay, I get that. But what I'm saying is, for example, if there's 2 mums, one mum claims abuse, because the other partner is also a mum, they're both mums. So effectively, the treatment that the father would, like, for example, father is automatically compromised. If you are 2 mums, one mum will not be automatically compromised, same as a father.
Probably not. No, I think that there's probably an argument for the 2 mums both getting a fair crack of the whip in terms of the court, and both being, well, come on now, we think we can sort this out because I don't need to victimise one of you. So yeah, I think there's probably an argument for that. And in my experience, and I've had a few cases, not many, but I've had a few cases which have involved 2 mums or indeed 2 dads. In those scenarios, there's always been very clearly somebody who has adopted the traditional role of mum
in the relationship,
and the traditional role of dad in the relationship.
One took the lead role as the dominant role. Let's put something else here.
Yeah.
One had the dominant role
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
submissive role, to say,
One's
put it one way.
one's perhaps the homemaker. That's not to suggest they're not
One's
working.
the breadwinner.
Yeah,
Okay,
just say.
let's
So
use a
that's
PC
sort of,
term. One's a breadwinner, one's a
yeah,
homemaker.
yeah.
So, okay, let's put another scenario here, because I read this somewhere, and I don't know how crazy this would be, but let's say, but at the time the application was put in, father put the application in to see children. By the time they get hearing, father went through all this emotional trauma, psychological trauma, and realized that he has this really strong maternal instinct and he feels he's a mother. So by the time father gets to court, he is officially gone down the official channels to his GP and decided to identify as the mother also.
Okay.
Can that give him more? I mean, would that work the same? Can he then get rid of this baggage that he's carrying in court by being a man, ultimately, by identifying as a woman and a mother of these children now?
The answer to that is I don't know.
And would he get those rights, those automatic rights that a mother has? Can he try and claim them? So yes,
I'll give you my answer to that, and it's an answer that's just straight from no direct experience of that scenario, but of just how I understand the court operates. It would entirely boil down to the judge on the day.
Okay,
and it boils down to the attitude of the judge on the day to that scenario.
Right.
How a judge views, because they're all human beings. So it's the judge's view of re-identification. Somebody who chooses now to identify as a man or a woman or whatever it may be. It would boil down to his or her view as to how they were managed.
Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. I suppose that makes sense. All right. Have you got anything positive you can tell us? Like, so, like after hearing loads of this, some father might listen to all this and think, it's no point.
I'm dead.
I'm
dead in the water.
It's no point. It's such a long shot. Should I even bother? What would you say to that? A father, okay, he wants to give up. He's gone, because we speak to a lot of fathers after 2-3 years of battling this emotional roller coaster. As you know, we've got a friend of ours who put a letter into court, wrapped it up because at the end of the day, you're still at mum's mercy. So, okay, so let's go into this, You've come to the end of your application, You've had your 3 hearings, judges made a judgment, he's written the order, dad is to have every other weekend and whatnot, Say after about a couple of months, you're getting that access, mum decides to start playing games again. Is that court order, does it hold any value, or is it still down to the mercy of mum ultimately? Mum to play ball?
No, because there are 2 questions there. There's the question about whether it's worth dad pursuing and whether it's worth dad chasing when he gets a court order that isn't being fulfilled. 2 questions. Let's deal with them separately.
Yes, fine.
Let's deal with them separately. So let's deal with the enforcement issue first. If you go to court and you've gone through a process and there's a final order at the end of it that says you get to see your children on these days or these times, or whatever it might be, and a couple of weeks, couple of months passes and you're not getting that, you are entitled to return to court under an enforcement application and go back to the court and say, look, you as a court said I could have A, B, C, D, and E, and I'm not getting A, B, C, D, and E. At that point, in an enforcement hearing, a lot of the issues of mum being in a primary position and dad being in a lesser position have gone away. Because at that point, the court is merely enforcing. Because what the person who is ignoring the order is doing then is they're not challenging dad, and let's use mum and dad. They're not challenging dad, they're challenging the court.
Right, I see.
So at that point, the court is annoyed because the court has gone to all this trouble to create this order, and let's use mum as the example, and mum has chose to ignore that order and do what she wants to do. That is not an affront to dad, that is an affront to the court.
Okay.
So the court will vehemently defend and enforce a child order, regardless of what the mix is between mum and dad. They will vehemently, because they say, we've taken the time to build this, you will live by it. There's issue number 1.
Okay, so the court, how can if the mum is refusing, because with all the cases and the files you deal with, if mum agrees at the time, okay, I will come weekend again, she starts playing games again. How does the court actually enforce mum to do this?
The court can't physically go around to mum's house and drag the children out. But what the court will do is, what they can do is, the court can enact social services to get involved to support the order. And ultimately, if it's repeatedly that mother is just ignoring the order, the court has the power to flip primary residency.
Oh, right.
So the court can bring the whole matter back to court and say, look, we gave you the how to fix this. You chose to ignore it. You've repeatedly breached the order. We now need to revisit this, potentially by changing who has primary carer status, who has residency status with these children.
So have you seen this happen?
Oh, yeah. I've seen that. I've seen that happen. But let's go back to the other question. The other question was, is it worth Dad's while? Absolutely. Because what I need to remind everybody who's watching this is that whilst it's hard for dads, and it is hard for dads, and I said at the outset, whether it's right or wrong, dads, the odds are stacked against dad in family court, and unfortunately, that people will shout down that statement, but that is the reality. But dad's not fighting for himself. Dad's taking the pain and taking the frustration and taking the turmoil, the emotional pain, but he's not fighting for himself. He's fighting for his children. And if somebody is not fighting for those children who are helpless and cannot fight for themselves because they're not allowed to go into family court and defend their own position, if dad's not doing it, who is?
Yes, you're right.
So dad has to go. He has to stick at it, and he has to use the court system, and he has to find himself a decent team to support him. And that team, whether that team is McKenzie Friends, whether that team is solicitors or barristers or whatever, or whether that team is a mix. Because one thing that we do within my practice, which is a little bit unique, is we also use barristers to support us on jobs. So we have a relationship with a chamber of barristers based here in London, and they have a second office up in Liverpool. And we work together with them. So you've got barristers, and that's quite odd. The reaction from judges is really quite amusing when you walk into a court and you say, I'm a McKenzie friend and he's a barrister, but we're working together on this case, because the court looks at you like, how can you do that?
Okay, so so I've had guys say to me that I represented myself, and only in the final hearing I took a barrister because I needed some big guns, so I saved my money for that one big shot that I needed. So that sort of thing, you can collaborate.
You can collaborate. You can do that. And people who, let me just describe. Take your example there. People who represent themselves right through an entire process, which potentially is a year or more, and then at the very death, when they need somebody just to come in on cup final day, and score the winning goal for them, they pull on a barrister. That's a great thing to do. Here's the problem with that: during the course of the run up to that, you potentially have jumped through some hoops that you didn't need to jump through because you didn't know, because you don't know the protocol. You have potentially been through some pain that you didn't need to go through because you didn't know the protocol. You have potentially arrived at cup final day, but you've arrived at cup final day with very little in your armory, because you haven't scored enough points along the way. Because had you worked with a professional, be that a solicitor or a McKenzie friend, had you worked with a professional, they would have scored a few points for you along the way. So when you get to the very end and you bring in a barrister, and this is how we work, well, I roll out a barrister when I believe one is necessary. But rather than that barrister just turning up on the day like some sort of hired gunslinger, and you say to him, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and then he sort of absorbs that into his head, or she does, and then they go off and do their thing. The way it works with ourselves is I actually spend a lot of time prepping, briefing, discussing with that barrister prior to the hearing, in order that he and I, or she and I, are in the same space as to how we're going to manage this case and move it forward. Because what I have, as the guy who's been on the case since day one, is I have intimate case knowledge.
Right, okay, gotcha.
He, she will never have that intimate case knowledge. They don't know about the hairbrush incident because the hairbrush incident was 6 hearings ago.
Yeah, so because you're working together with this barrister, they give you more value for money. It's added value rather than the traditional sense where the solicitor say, first hearing, you need me, I need to make this bundle, we need a barrister. You turn up at the first hearing, they shout out your name, the respondent, the defendant, and then everyone go home and you've lost $5,000 for nothing. Yeah, it's not like that. You're talking where, so you've got him working with you genuinely for your best interest, because you, as the McKenzie friend, who's not just about the money, who is driving this,
Yeah.
from a better position
Yeah.
in that sense.
Yeah.
All right, Dan, let's go to a quick break
Mm-hmm.
and maybe see how we're doing for time. If we can squeeze any more out, we will. If not, we'll go to a conclusion. Back in a minute. Right, we are back. Now, me and Mr. Ryan could continue talking for hours, and time is short. He's a very busy man. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and just conclude all of this and try and end this on a positive note. And knowing what we know about the society we live in, the family court system that is around us, Mr. Ryan is going to try and give some advice to youngsters who are getting involved in marriages and relationships and potentially looking to have children, to how not to get here.
Yeah, I guess when all of us set off on a relationship, be we 20 years old or 50 years old, when all of us set off on a relationship, we don't ever anticipate ending up in a court and fighting with our partner, because in that moment that we start off a relationship, they are the most adorable thing on God's earth. Whoever your God may be, they are the center of your world. What I say to lots of people, and we do a lot of sort of early relationship counselling as well as what we do in family court, is I say to people, look, all I ask you to do is take a little sober moment at the start of a relationship that is starting to get serious. Don't do it at the start of every relationship where you're just going to the cinema twice and then that's it burns out. But where a relationship is starting to get serious, where you think I potentially have a future here with this other human being, take a sober moment, both of you, to say, look, we just need to have a very difficult conversation about what happens if this goes wrong.
Right.
What happens if we are 10 years down the road, we've got 2 children who are undoubtedly beautiful, and we just kind of run out of steam, or one of us wants something that the other one doesn't, or life just kind of leads us like that, because that's what life does. How do we manage that situation sensibly? Because currently what people do is they don't have that conversation. They get to the point where they're doing that, and they've got 2 children in the middle of it, and they think, well, the only way I can get out of this is to start shouting, start swearing, start protecting my position.
Right, yes.
And by protecting my position, I am undermining yours, because that's the only way I know how to do this.
Okay.
What I'm saying is at a very early stage, 10 years prior back, when you had your first few dates, and you think, yeah, this is getting serious. Now, I'm starting to feel some real lifelong love for this human being. Have that sober conversation. What do we do if this starts to go wrong? Firstly, how do we identify that this is starting to go wrong? And that is about constant throughout the basis of a relationship. That is about constant communication. That is about constantly talking to each other about the good stuff and the bad stuff. Because if you stop talking, you stop listening. If you stop listening, you stop caring. And every relationship is based on those 3 premises that you've got. You talk, you listen, you care. So there's a more practical element to that as well, and this is just about protecting each other. You may want to entertain, and there are circumstances where this is right, circumstances where it's not, but you may want to entertain a prenuptial arrangement. So you may want to entertain.
Okay, Stan, sorry,
so
I can eradicate any confusion. A lot of people, the arguments I've heard about the prenup is it's not recognised in British courts, English law, or it can help in some cases, and that's a grey area. So just while you're on the topic, just cover that as well, please,
okay.
So we know where we stand with it.
Okay, very quickly with prenup then. There is a general myth that prenuptial agreements are not recognised in the court system. They are.
They are, okay.
Providing they are robust, providing they have been created in the right way, providing they've been underwritten by a solicitor, providing they've been notarized in order that the judge who's looking at it when you're down that road of falling apart, the judge who's looking at that prenuptial agreement can see that both of you had full independent opportunity to consider it and agree to it before it was sealed and signed.
Right. And is that also if you were getting married as in a civil registry or not?
Same premise, same premise. To say, if you're entering any sort of relationship, you can prenup on, you don't. Marriage doesn't have to be prenup. You can have a civil partnership and choose to have a prenup. You can have just a cohabiting relationship,
and still have a prenup.
If you choose to have an agreement where you say, look, I'm coming into this with this,
Right. Okay.
You're coming in with this.
Uh-huh.
I think at the very least, I should be able to leave with this,
Right.
and you should be able to leave with that. And if we have that as the premise, then everything that's in the middle, we know that we did that together.
Right.
Consequently,
okay, so we can divide that.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay.
Consequently, we divide it. But people don't have that conversation because they're so loved up, and that's wonderful. But they're so loved up in the early stages of the relationship that they forget the fact that, well, hang on a minute, I had this that I've spent, the 20 years building, and you've got that you spent your time building. And there's this automatic assumption that we're just going to throw it in a pot, and at some point in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to fight about it. It doesn't need to be that way. If you have some sensible conversation, and it's awkward, let's not kid ourselves, it's awkward. But if we have some sensible conversation at the start of a relationship that says, look, I kind of hope that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you. And that would be wonderful. And I kind of hope that every year gets better. That's what we're aiming for in life. That's all we aim for when we look for a life partner. But the real world tells me, and the statistics tell me, that there is some chance that we're going to fall apart at some point. All I want to do now at this early stage, before we focus on just having a great time together, is just put in place a little plan. What happens if we start to fall apart?
So if you both of you sign up to this prenup, if it's properly written, let's say, can they go to does it have to be written by a lawyer or a McKenzie friend or someone legal? Who needs to write it? How does this work?
It doesn't have to be written by somebody legal. You can write it up between you, but it has to be, you have to go to one of two places. When you've written it and you're both happy with it, you either take it to a solicitor, and it has to be a solicitor. A McKenzie friend doesn't have the power to do it. So you can take it to a solicitor in order that he then basically gets the two of you to sign it in front of him. He witnesses it, locks it down. Or the alternative to that is you take it to what we call a notary. A notary is basically also a solicitor. All he does is he sits in front of you and he says, have you read it? Do you understand it? Do you agree with it? Sign on that line. And then turns to the other party and says in exactly the same way, have you read it? Do you understand it? Do you agree with it? Sign on that line. Gotcha. He will then stamp it with what they call the notarizing stamp, and you're done. And then invariably the solicitor or the notary will hold it. Will hold a copy of it for you in order that in 10 years' time, when you're trying to kill each other, one of you doesn't find the prenup and rip it up.
Right. Okay. Right. To all the young men out there that are entering relationships and marriages, you've heard it. You know what to do. Get on it. I should have seen this video 10 years ago. Unfortunately, it's 10 years too late for me. It's
about just being fair, and as I say, it's about young men. It's about young women as well.
Yes, young women as well.
Because young women could be arriving with,
my bad. No,
yeah,
you're right.
No, that's fine.
Yes, yeah.
But so both parties are arriving with something.
Yes.
So both parties deserve to have that something, whatever it might be, protected. Protected, because that's absolutely right. And then, and as I've said already, then what you build in the middle, you accept the fact that we built that together.
Exactly. No, bang on. So there's women out there. This is for you. This channel is not biased in any way. We support the whole alienated family, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, a whole lot. So to everyone out there, remember this. Dan, is there anything else you would like to say?
All I would say in closing this out is that I spend all day, every day involved with the family court system, which means I spend all day, every day working with people who are fighting with somebody else. Because that's the only reason you go to court. You don't go there because you're amenable people and you're working it out yourselves. You go to court because you're in trouble. That gives me quite a jaded view, because that makes me think that the world is full of people who are fighting with everybody else. But that is not the case. For every court case that I present, and I've presented hundreds over the years, for every court case that I deal with, I kind of hope that there are 10 other cases that I never get to see.
Yes.
Because they dealt with it as civilized human beings who just accept the fact that life moves on, people change. And so don't assume that life is black and horrible, because it's not. Life is a beautiful place to be. We just need to kind of respect the fact that we all have our own objectives, we all have our own agendas. And as long as we respect each other, and as long as we all condemn domestic abuse because there's no place for it, then I'd like to get to the point where the family court is redundant. Not great, because that means I need to think of something else to do. But that would be a wonderful outcome for me.
Okay, no, perfect. Then we'll close that in a minute. But let me just add one more thing to that point. Then. But would you agree then, Dan, what studies and statistics are saying that divorce is on the high. Yeah.
Divorce is on the rise.
And women are, the statistically completely wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. Most cases, women are initiating divorce cross communities, cross cultures.
Yes, they are.
That is correct.
Yes, they are. Yeah. The statistics show at the moment that the bulk of divorces are initiated by women.
Okay, before we close out, why do you think that is?
I think it's because women, and this is a positive thing in some strange way, women have become more conscious over the years, and as time's gone by, and they've become more aware of the fact that they don't have to be downtrodden, that they don't have to play by the rules. And so, they accept the fact that they can be masters of their own destiny, or mistresses of their own destiny, to flip that analogy. And so, hence, as a result of that, women are taking control of their own lives. And that's a great thing. I have absolutely no issue with that. So hence the reason that we are seeing more women who are now standing up and saying, do you know what? I don't need to do this anymore. And so I'm not going to do this anymore. And I'm now going to initiate divorce.
Yeah, but is that not a bad thing for society as a whole? Breaking that, the more families that are breaking up, more children losing contact, say with either parent, either or. As a society, though, as a species, for humanity, is this not a bad thing?
Yeah, okay. The other side of that coin, and it's an argument that I wasn't going to get into, but I'm going to now, is that as society, we have become, our mindset is too disposable. We don't value anything as a society, and I was kind of hoping to end on a positive, but we don't value anything. We don't value our cars, we change them at will. We don't value our clothes because we buy clothes that fast fashion, and we wear it once and we toss it in the bin. And unfortunately, that eventually works its way through to the fact that we don't value our relationships.
Right, I see.
And so we have become very disposable, and we're now at a case where a barrister who I've worked with for many, many years, and he's been counselling for 1,000 years, uses the full ashtray analogy. He says the problem we have with relationships is once the ashtray is full, we change the relationship. In the same way as the ashtray is full, you change your car. And that's where we are. We've become very disposable, and we've become very intolerant, and we've become very impatient as a human race. And so we do now assume the grass is always greener. We do now assume that it's okay for us just to throw something out, the baby with the bathwater, throw something out in the trash and move on. And that's incredibly sad. That's debilitating for society, that we are walking that line. But we are, and we've been walking it for a while, and I fear that we'll never turn around and walk back the other way.
Yes, where do you think this will end? This is what I'm saying. I'm genuinely concerned for all of us, our children growing up. How are they going to end up? What sort of? Are you not scared?
Oh, I'm terrified. I'm terrified for children. I'm thankfully my children are all grown up, and finding their own way in life. But young children, I look at young children as I do in family court every day, and I think, what's the future for you? Because what's the example that we're setting for you? We're destroying your planet. We're demonstrating to you that this is how not to run a relationship, by you can throw people out when you've run out of use for them. So the examples we're setting are just appalling. And the outlook is not great for young people.
All right, so much for ending on a positive note. Right, I won't go on down. I know time is short. We'll have to pick this up on another podcast on another day. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming down. Right, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share, and we will see you on the next one.